While helping my parents with their lodge renovation, I stepped into the garage for supplies and heard my father say, "I still can't believe how useless he is. We need to cut him out of the inheritance before he bleeds us dry." My mother replied, "Already on it. Our lawyer says we can even reclaim the startup funding." I returned with a perfect smile. 3 days later, my phone was flooded with 47 desperate messages begging me. They say you can tell when something breaks inside you, that it's not loud or messy, but quiet. Like a light switch flipped in an empty room. That's how it felt. My name is Jordan Bennett. I'm 34 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I run a mid-sized logistics company that I built from scratch. No outside investors. Just hustle and a gut that never learned to quit. That weekend, I was at my parents' vacation lodge by Lake Lure, helping them renovate the place. They wanted to modernize it before summer, new fixtures, updated floors, maybe flip it later for a profit. I didn't ask why they needed help. I just showed up with my truck and tools. The weird thing is, I wasn't even supposed to be in the house when it happened. I had stepped back inside to grab a level I left on the kitchen counter. The door was barely open when I heard my father's voice drifting from the living room. "He's deadweight, Susan. Always has been." There was a pause. Then my mother's voice, flat and clinical. "We already agreed. We'll remove him from the estate this year. And I want that startup money documented as a loan. I'm tired of pretending." I stood frozen, the level in my hand suddenly heavy. Deadweight. Loan. Startup money. They meant the $30,000 they gave me 8 years ago, the money I used to buy my first delivery truck. I'd asked if it was a loan back then. Dad waved it off, told me, "Just pay it forward." I did. 100 times over. I should have stormed in, thrown something, screamed. But instead, I took a slow breath and backed out of the kitchen like a thief. Grabbed my toolbox from the porch and returned to the deck I'd been resurfacing. Nails, wood, silence. When my dad came out 10 minutes later with 2 beers, he tossed me one and asked how much longer I thought the railing would take. I smiled and said, 2 hours, if I don't get interrupted. He chuckled, clueless. But something in me had shifted. Not rage, not exactly. Something colder, clearer. This wasn't about fixing things anymore. This wasn't about winning them over. It was about protecting what I'd built. I worked late that night, past sunset, until the bugs swarmed my headlamp and the hammer started slipping in my hand. I showered in the lodge's downstairs bathroom and went to bed in the tiny guest room, eyes wide open in the dark. The next morning, I drove into town, found a local coffee shop with decent Wi-Fi, and spent 3 hours researching legal protections. Liens, invoices, contractor rights. Every move had to be clean, documented. I texted Eric, my old college roommate, now a commercial attorney in Charlotte, and told him I needed to talk. Family related, I added. Not friendly. He called within the hour. By Sunday night, I had started a folder on my laptop titled Protection Plan. Inside it, photos of the deckwork, receipts for materials I'd paid for, a timeline of labor hours, even screen recordings of bank transactions. 48 hours after hearing my parents' voices break whatever was left of my trust, I wasn't angry. I was ready. By Monday morning, I was back on the roof, sealing joints with silicone and pretending nothing had changed. My dad walked past carrying a clipboard, nodding like we were 2 men on the same mission. My mom brought out sandwiches around noon and set them on a plastic tray like she always did, cutting mine the way I liked, diagonal, not horizontal. The same hand that would eventually sign the papers to cut me out of everything. I smiled and thanked her. Ate half the sandwich, saved the rest for later. They had no idea what I knew. The lodge sat right on the edge of the lake, postcard perfect. We used to spend summers here when I was a kid, canoe trips, bug bites, my dad grilling over charcoal while mom read novels in the sun. Back then, I thought we were close. Thought I was just different, not lesser. But now, I knew better. Now I understood those smiles they gave me at Thanksgiving. The way they clapped when I talked about expanding the business. Jordan's doing his little trucking thing, they'd say, like it was a lemonade stand I refused to outgrow. I thought helping them with the renovation might soften things. Maybe show them how much I still wanted to be part of the family. I even paid out of pocket for new cedar planks when the ones they picked warped in the rain. Never asked for reimbursement. But none of it mattered. I was dead weight. That stung more than I thought it would. I kept working. Day after day, rain or shine. I logged everything now, photos of the framing, close-ups of the tool receipts, timestamps on every major task. I organized them in folders by date and labeled them clearly. Not because I needed to, but because one day soon, someone else might. They kept smiling. I kept playing the part. When my dad asked if I could pick up some paint samples in town, I nodded and said, of course. When my mom asked what I thought about redoing the upstairs bathroom tile, I said it was a smart investment. It was like watching a movie I'd already seen. I knew the ending. I just hadn't let them in on it yet. In the quiet moments, between sanding and sealing and hauling debris, my mind wandered back to high school. I remembered telling them I wanted to skip college and start a freight company. My dad had looked at me like I said I wanted to be a circus clown. You'll break your back before you make $1, he said. Blue collar doesn't build legacy. But I did it anyway, even when they rolled their eyes. Even when they sent job listings for office work. I ate ramen in a warehouse with no heat, slept in the back of my first truck more nights than I could count. I hustled routes myself for years, built the fleet one van at a time. And when I hit my first million in revenue, I emailed them a photo of the number. No reply. That should have been enough. That should have been the moment I gave up trying. But it wasn't. Not back then. Now it was different. Now I was done trying to be their son and started acting like what I really was, an unpaid contractor with something to prove. And every time I smiled at them that week, every polite nod, every sure thing and I'll handle it, I smiled the same smile they wore when they were planning to erase me. Only mine was sharper. Mine had a deadline. Tuesday night, I sat in the cab of my truck parked outside the lodge, phone glowing in my hand. My heart was beating like I'd just finished a race. I stared at the contact for a minute before tapping call. Eric picked up on the second ring. Jordan, you all right? No, I said, but I will be. There was a pause. Then his voice shifted, lower, more serious. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him how I'd been helping my parents renovate their lake house for free, materials, labor, everything. I explained the history, how they gave me seed money for my company, told me it was a gift, then called it a loan behind my back. I told him about the conversation I overheard. My dad calling me deadweight. My mom talking about reclaiming the money and cutting me out of the estate like I was some mistake they were correcting. Eric didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, he said, "You've got no written contract, right?" "No. Just trust." "Big mistake." He let out a breath. "All right. Here's the thing. Even without a formal agreement, you've got leverage. You've done work. You've paid for materials. You can file a mechanic's lien on the property." I blinked. "A what?" "Contractor's lien," he clarified. "If you do unpaid work or front materials on someone's property, you can file a lien, basically a legal hold. It freezes the title until the debt is resolved." I sat back in the seat, the idea landing with weight. They wouldn't be able to sell the house? "Not until they settle the lien," he said. "It won't be pretty, but it's legal. And it's fair. It's not revenge, man. It's protection." For the first time in days, I felt something close to control. What do I need to do? Document everything. Photos, receipts, timestamps, texts. "You'll need to invoice them first. Then we file." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I've already been documenting." I started right after I overheard them. "Good. Draft an invoice tonight. Include labor, market rate, and itemized materials. I'll review it tomorrow." "Eric," I said, staring out at the lodge lights glowing through the trees. "Thank you." He was quiet a second. Then he said, "They always treated you like the dumb one. But this is genius. And fair." After we hung up, I stayed in the truck and opened my laptop. I pulled up the file labeled Protection Plan and started building the invoice. 29 hours of labor, 12 receipts for materials, mileage, cleanup. I priced it all at standard contractor rates, nothing inflated. Just honest numbers. By midnight, the invoice was done. 7 pages. Precise. I sat back and stared at the screen. Not revenge. Not anger. Just a bill. A reminder that my work has value, even if they never saw it. Wednesday morning, I headed back into town early. There was still some trim work to finish at the lodge, but I needed a break from pretending. I told my parents I was picking up supplies, then parked outside a coffee shop with strong Wi-Fi and stronger coffee. I opened the shared family cloud folder on my laptop, the one my mom insisted we use for important documents. Most of it was boring, old scanned tax returns, cabin photos, a folder marked Thanksgiving 2019 that I didn't dare open. But halfway down the list was a PDF I didn't recognize. The file name was sterile, Jordan Loan _terms draft _V3. My stomach dropped. I clicked it open. The first page hit like a slap to the face. Unexecuted agreement, personal loan, Jordan Bennett. Page 2 was worse. It laid out repayment terms with high interest and penalties. Paragraphs of legalese written in cold ink, as if I were some stranger they didn't trust. A demand clause sat front and center, loan to be repayable in full upon request, no advance notice required. Then, at the bottom of page 3, in the margin, a note in my mother's handwriting. Ensure enforceability. Prepare for potential inheritance leverage. I sat there, staring at the screen, the coffee untouched. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a miscommunication or hurt feelings or something that got twisted in a moment of frustration. This was planned. Calculated. They never saw that money as support. They saw it as a leash. My hands clenched on the table. I scrolled through the rest of the document, scanning for some hint of doubt, some note of affection, anything to make me think they ever meant to help. There was nothing. No love, no trust. Just strategy. A few tables away, someone laughed. I flinched. I saved the file to my laptop and backed it up twice. Labeled it in red, intent_evidence.pdf. Then I sat there for a while, staring at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. My entire childhood played in reverse. Every family trip, every time my dad talked about earning your keep, every sideways comment about my business being not real work. They never respected me. They tolerated me because I was convenient. I remember the day I bought my first truck, drove it to their house, parked it out front. My mom came out and said, "Cute. I hope it doesn't break down in the driveway." I had laughed back then, shrugged it off. But now I saw it for what it was. They had always seen me as something temporary, a burden they might one day be free of. I closed my laptop and took a breath. That document had taken the guesswork out of it. No more wondering if I was being paranoid. No more giving them the benefit of the doubt. Now I had proof. And that changed everything. I filed the lien Monday morning at precisely 8:12 a.m. It took all of 20 minutes at the county recorder's office. I handed over the invoice, the receipts, the documentation of labor, and the unsigned loan draft I'd found in the shared folder. The clerk gave me a stiff smile, stapled my paperwork, and said, "You'll get confirmation in 2 to 3 business days." By noon, the ripple had already begun. My phone lit up like it was on fire, first a call from my mom, which I ignored, then 2 from my dad, 1 text, then 5, then 10. By the time I pulled into the hardware store parking lot to grab more caulk, I had 18 missed calls and a voicemail from my mom that started off shaky and ended in shouting, "Jordan, what is this? What is this thing you filed? We're getting notifications from the county. You need to call me back right now." I didn't. Instead, I picked up what I needed, paid in cash, and drove the long way around the lake before heading back to the lodge. The sky was clear. The water still. The piece felt artificial, like stage lighting before the curtains rise on a fight scene. By the time I arrived, 2 local contractors were packing up their trucks. One of them, Hank, a guy they'd hired to redo the upstairs tile, nodded at me with a smirk. "Guess the job's on hold," he said. "Permits are frozen." "Legal stuff," they said. I nodded. "Guess so." The look on my dad's face when he stepped outside and saw me standing there? Priceless. He didn't yell. Not right away. He just looked confused. Angry, sure, but mostly stunned. Like he still didn't quite believe I had the guts to strike first. "You filed a lien on the house?" he asked, stepping down the porch stairs. I leaned on the railing I just finished sealing last week. "I did." His jaw clenched. "What the hell are you thinking?" I stayed calm. Even now, I kept my voice even. "I'm thinking I worked nearly 70 hours on this place and paid out of pocket for materials. I'm thinking I overheard you call me deadweight. And I'm thinking you're not going to erase me without a fight." He stared at me for a long time, like he was trying to figure out what version of me he was looking at. "The lien is public," he finally said. "People talk. People know this property." I nodded. "Good. Let them talk." That's when my mom appeared at the doorway, voice brittle and sharp. "You're humiliating us." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." That afternoon, the renovation officially stopped. Permit offices put a freeze on the site, and the local building inspector flagged the project for review. I didn't gloat. I didn't even watch them panic, not directly. But I saw the aftermath. Calls kept coming in. My phone buzzed like it had a heartbeat of its own. I let each one go to voicemail. Listened to none of them. I sat in the back of my truck with a thermos of coffee and stared out at the lake like it was the first time I'd really seen it. The lodge sat still and silent behind me. No workers. No progress. No lies. Just quiet. And the slow, perfect unraveling of the story they'd written about me. It was just after 8 on Wednesday night when I got the first message from Alana. "Hey, what's going on? I heard about the lien. Can we talk?" For a second, I actually paused. My thumb hovered over the screen. Alana and I weren't close, but we weren't hostile either. She lived out in Raleigh with her husband, 2 kids, the usual suburbia setup. Out of all of us, she'd always been the one I thought might get it, might see me. I thought maybe, just maybe, she hadn't known. I typed back, "Yeah, we can talk." She called 10 minutes later. Her voice was soft, almost cautious. "Jordan, I'm not trying to take sides here. I just want to understand what happened." I told her the basics, the work, the money, what I overheard. I left out the worst of it, the file, the loan terms. I wanted to believe she'd asked the right questions, that she might hear the weight behind my words and lean toward me. Just a little. For a while, she listened quietly. Then she said it. "Well, I mean, even if you're upset, isn't this something we handle within the family? Not through legal filings?" My gut twisted. There it was. That word again. Family. What do you mean? I asked, voice low. "I just mean, dragging lawyers into this? It's not how we fix things. We settle issues privately. Like adults." I almost laughed. "Like adults," I repeated. "You mean, pretend nothing happened and keep my mouth shut?" Keep building their damn deck while they erase me in the background. Jordan, that's not fair. No, I snapped. What's not fair is being told your startup help was a gift, only to find out years later they wrote a repayment plan behind your back. What's not fair is being called deadweight by your own father while you're up on a roof fixing his house for free. There was silence on her end. Then, carefully, you've always been sensitive. I closed my eyes. That word, that tone. You're on their side, I said. No, I'm just trying to keep the peace. There's no peace, I said flatly. There's just silence and control. And I'm done with both. She sighed, disappointed. Like I was the one letting the family down. When the call ended, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. Not just from the day or the fight, but from all of it. The years of hoping someone would step in. The years of telling myself that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. But I wasn't. And now I knew it. Even Alana had a role to play. Loyal daughter. Quiet enforcer. Apologist in soft tones. They could keep their unity. I'd keep my distance. By the end of the week, the attorneys were fully engaged. My parents didn't wait long to send their opening move, a formal letter from a downtown Charlotte firm, typed and sealed with all the fake courtesy money could buy. The letter accused me of filing a malicious lien, of interfering with lawful property development, and even hinted at a defamation claim for harmful insinuations made about their character. I brought the letter straight to Eric. He skimmed it with a slow smirk pulling at the corners of his mouth. They're bluffing, he said, flipping to the second page. This is textbook intimidation. They've got nothing. You sure? I asked, though deep down I already knew. Eric looked up at me, serious now. Jordan, they didn't have a written loan agreement. They never paid you a dime for the labor or materials. You documented everything, timestamps, receipts, even photos. And then you found that draft contract. That's not just a smoking gun. That's the whole fire. He pulled up the PDF I'd saved, intent_evidence.pdf. The one with my mother's margin note about inheritance leverage. That sentence alone, he said, would neutralize half their arguments. If they countersue, we bury them with this, he added. But I don't think it'll go that far. They won't want this in a courtroom. And he was right. By the following Monday, their tone changed. Their attorney sent a new letter, quieter in tone, no threats, just requesting clarification regarding the nature and scope of the lien. That was legal speak for let's talk before this gets worse. The renovation, of course, was still frozen. Rumors were spreading around the lake. A property like theirs, high-end, highly visible, didn't sit idle without people noticing. The neighbors started asking questions. Contractors who used to clamor for their business now hesitated. Word was getting out that the Bennetts had legal drama. My parents hated that more than anything. They'd spent decades crafting their image, pillars of the community, patrons of the arts, the smiling couple who donated to local fundraisers and hosted wine nights. And now they were just a stalled property and a headline waiting to happen. When negotiations finally opened, I didn't go in with demands. I went in with facts. I'm not looking to profit, I told Eric, who relayed everything through formal channels. I just want reimbursement for my labor, my materials, and full legal acknowledgement of the lien's legitimacy. Their side dragged their feet for a few days, probably hoping I'd cave. I didn't. Eventually, they agreed. Quietly, begrudgingly. They signed a settlement that paid out the exact value of the lien, waived any claims about the alleged loan, and didn't include a single apology. Just a wire transfer. And silence. Afterward, Eric asked if I felt like I'd won. I told him no. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a man who finally stopped losing. The most valuable thing I gained wasn't the money. It was the proof. They had power over me for years. But it turns out, their control only lasted as long as I let them believe I had nothing to fight with. Turns out I did. I had the truth. The money landed in my account on a Thursday morning. Clean numbers, no messages, no phone calls. Just a transfer from their attorney's escrow, marked final settlement. I stared at it for a minute, half expecting something to happen. A knock on the door. An email. Some sort of final twist. But there was nothing. It was over. The alleged loan, the one they whispered about behind my back, was formally dismissed in writing. The lien was lifted, satisfied in full. Legally, they had no claim on me. No leverage. No say in my future. And just like that, the foundation of their control collapsed. There were no apologies. No explanations. Just cold, transactional silence. Our last communication was through lawyers. And then came the next wave of silence. Alana blocked me on everything. Phone, email, even LinkedIn. Her way of saying, you crossed a line. I didn't bother trying to reach out. There was nothing left to salvage. The family, as I knew it, was gone. Not in a dramatic way. No screaming or public blowouts. Just severed. Neatly. Surgically. Like someone closing a door and locking it from the other side. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was a kind of mourning. I sat alone on my couch that night, sipping a whiskey I hadn't opened in over a year. The blinds were half shut. The house smelled like sawdust and fresh paint from a project I'd left unfinished. My tools were still in the truck. I hadn't gone back to the lodge since the lien was filed. I stared at the dark screen of my TV and thought about everything I didn't say to them. Everything I used to want, some version of a reconciliation, a moment of clarity where they'd see me and say, "We were wrong. You mattered." But that moment was never coming. And maybe it never could have. They had built their image of me a long time ago, stuck to it like gospel. The son who didn't go to law school. The one who built a trucking company instead of a resume. To them, my success was accidental. A fluke. Nothing that deserved real respect. I could have made $10 million, and they still would have said I got lucky. So I let the grief come. Not for the loss of people. They were still alive, still out there, but for the loss of what I'd been trying to hold on to. The version of family I'd been chasing for years. The version that existed only in my head. You don't just walk away from family. But sometimes they walk away first. They just do it slowly, with small cuts, quiet dismissals, and conditional love, until one day you realize you're the only one still standing at the edge trying to build a bridge. That night, I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and opened the trash drawer. Inside was the last holiday card they'd ever sent me, glossy, posed, full of fake cheer. I shredded it without hesitation. It felt like closure. Not clean, not painless, but real. The following Monday, I walked into my warehouse office like I had 1,000 times before, only this time, it felt different. My guys were already there. Will was loading invoices into the system. Darnell was at the dispatch board, juggling for delivery routes. Someone had brought in donuts. "Boss," Will said, nodding at me. "You look like you slept." I smiled. First time in weeks. They didn't ask about the family stuff. Not directly, but I saw it in the way they glanced up when I walked by, checking, quietly, if I was still standing. If the weight I'd been carrying had finally been set down. I went into my office, closed the door, and looked around. Same framed photo of my first delivery van on the wall. Same whiteboard with mileage targets and staffing goals. Same coffee mug with the company logo I designed in a gas station parking lot at age 26. It felt like coming home. I sat down and flipped through the morning's reports. One of our new drivers, Sammy, had clocked in an hour early every day this week. I made a note to bump his bonus. Small things, but they mattered. This company wasn't just numbers and routes. It was mine. Every square foot of it built without my family's approval, permission, or praise. I had bled for it, starved for it, stayed up nights dreaming and doubting in equal measure. And I had made it. That evening, long after everyone else went home, I stayed behind. I paced the empty warehouse, thinking about how far we'd come. 10 drivers, 3 hubs, clients in 5 states, all grown from that first second-hand truck. I pulled out my phone, opened the front-facing camera, and hit record. The words came slowly at first, then with more force. "I don't usually talk like this," I began. "But tonight I need to say something." I looked down, gathered myself, then continued. "When I started this company, I was told it was a waste of time, that it wasn't a real career, that I'd never make it, that I was too blue-collar to ever matter." I paused, and it hurt, because the people saying it weren't strangers. They were family. I let that sit. I spent years trying to prove them wrong. But what I finally learned is this: some people will never see your worth, no matter what you do. Not because you're lacking, but because they need you to stay small, to make themselves feel big. I stared at the lens, voice steady now. So if you're out there trying to earn love by shrinking yourself, stop. If they can't see you now, they never will. I leaned in just slightly. Your worth isn't decided by those who refuse to see it. I ended the recording and sat in the silence that followed. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't fix the years. But it felt like something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. That night, as I locked up the warehouse and walked to my truck, the air felt clearer than it had in months. No more pretending. No more fighting to belong. I wasn't building bridges anymore. I was building walls. Real ones. Strong ones. With clean lines and solid foundation. And this time, they were mine.